this video, it's reminiscent of things that are happening all over Ukraine at the moment, the front line. We're seeing in a small, probably area of woodland, vast open areas of Ukraine interspersed with little pockets of woodland, and that's where Russian forces will be setting up their defences. And what you're seeing here is the massively intense fighting that's happening in small areas, whether it's along a wood line or whether it's actually within a larger wood. Just the sense of all of these bunkers you can see here, where they look very makeshift, but they absolutely work. They stop rockets, and you're watching a grenade being thrown in now to clear that area. But obviously the Ukrainians will be paranoid that the Russians have survived the initial onslaught. And here, tragically, is one of the Ukrainians has taken a hit. One of his comrades is pulling him clear, while one of his fellows is providing covering fire. I'm very struck by watching this, that there's a whole generation of people brought up on games, Call of Duty and other such games, first-person shooter, and that's what this feels like when you first look at it. But of course there is no reset. You can't control that reset. You can't say, right, I've been killed, let's come back alive in another part of it. For these soldiers, they are fighting, it's kill or be killed. And I can only imagine the adrenaline that's pouring through their bodies. Now they're going through, they've just cleared one of the bunkers. It's a complete mess. But inevitably, they're pulling out guns, ammunition, machine guns. You know, you could call it looting, you could call it liberating, but the harsh reality is that sustaining forces on the front line is actually very difficult. They get through a lot of ammunition. And as you can see here, the Russians have loads of ammunition in their bunkers. So what this allows is the Ukrainians to self-sustain, to actually start using the Russians' weapons, their ammunition, against them. One of the Ukrainians has just seen it as another Russian emplacement further up. You can see them liberating some hand grenades that they're going to use to clear the next bunker. But of course the Russians know where their emplacements are, the Ukrainians do not. So there's a trap every step of the way, and the Ukrainians have to be very methodical, sort of working their way through. And even when there's an open bunker, they don't know whether there's anything down there. Imagine the fear going through your body of that somebody might suddenly jump up with a hand grenade or a machine gun. So what we're seeing here now is that the Ukrainians have found somebody still alive in one of the Russian bunkers. As Ukrainians sat on the edge there talking to the Russian, because basically they're giving them the chance to come out alive or die in the bunker. And here's some footage from the drone, allegedly of the Russians running away. Generally they have a headquarters, so you have lots of out placements where the bunkers are. This looks like they're running towards their headquarters, a sort of bigger enclosed area where they would hope to have some sanctuary. But the Ukrainians will know that if they just suddenly advance on that, they could walk into a trap. And inevitably the Russians will have booby-trapped these woodlands as well. In the winter, which we were fighting, none of the leaves on the trees would be there. There wouldn't have been any cover. Whereas now you can start to see the greenery arriving, provides some cover from which which generally favours the defence because they can be hidden away. And of course, that's the infantry. Now they've called upon tank support, because now they think they've got them pinned down, the Russians pinned down in their headquarters. So now the best way to flush them out of that is to bring in the heavy armour. So they will be pointing out to the commander of the tank where to go, what the threat is. And there's not a lot that the Russians can do at this stage, and what appears to be happening now is the tank just drives into the woodland and drives over the top of this Russian emplacement. And you can only imagine that there's nothing the Russians can do here. They won't have effective anti-tank weapons. They'll have just been laden with smaller caliber munitions, and the tank's just going to roll backwards and forwards now, flushing out the remaining Russian soldiers. But this is really good example of coordinated attack between the tanks and the infantry in a really confined area. And I reiterate, this is happening all over Ukraine at the moment, which is why the casualties are so high. And as you can see at the bottom of the screen there, the Ukrainian soldiers just moving in really cautiously, just to take over once the tank has finished doing its damage to that headquarters area. It's quite sobering. I say, this is not a game. This is violence, death and destruction being wreaked all along the front line of Ukraine on a daily basis.